And we're live. How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest Mets news and rumors live show here on WardyNYM that we have been consistently doing at least every other day, really since the MLB offseason first began. And this week, with Thanksgiving coming up just a couple days away, we are likely going to be live every single day up until that point. Of course, barring any other breaking news topics that we may find out prior to that, and of course after the holiday. But we have a lot to get into tonight, not only regarding what has been happening with Yamamoto, as he's officially posted for MLB free agency, and yes, that is very exciting, as he is the Mets' #1 pitching target, like many clubs this MLB offseason. But the latest hires for the Mets front office that we have spoke about at great length in Chris Gross already, but haven't really discussed too much in Andy Green, so we're going to talk about it a bit by him. We're also going to get into a breaking news report that's come out over the past hour or so that the Mets have hired someone new for their bullpen coach that we're about to get into. Then we're also going to break down all the latest starting pitching targets, reportedly not named Yamamoto. Luis Severino, could Sevy be coming to Queens? We're going to share further thoughts on that aside from the video we already did on the channel. Tyler Glasnow, Dylan Cease, what these guys have in common? They are trade bait and are 100% going to be dealt this offseason. So could the Mets find themselves in these trade talks? Should they find themselves in these trade talks? Along with plenty of other updates, along with overall, what is next for this Mets team? Will it be hiring a bench coach? Will it be signing a player? Speaking of signing players, they did sign Cole Sulzer, reliever, to a minor league contract that we're going to get into shortly as well. So a couple updates to get into in Mets land, and of course, make sure to smash that like and subscribe on as you're first chiming in live on a replay. Happy to have all you beauties in here. Of course, everyone watching live right now, please let me know how my audio is for the show. I greatly appreciate it, because it's been fluctuating. I'm constantly going back and forth between my two mics. It's like one day this mic is working well, then it's not, then I have to use the other one, then the other one isn't working well. So just let me know if the audio is okay for you guys, if it's overbearing at all. Just please be honest with me. But more than anything, happy to have all you beauties in here as we're about to break down all the latest in Mets land, and we're always happy, we're always excited to do this. There's a reason why this has consistently been far and away the best live show on YouTube, talking all things Mets all off season long, and I have all you amazing Mets fans to thank for that. So seriously, thank you so much. And also thank you, we're getting oh so close to 25,000 subscribers, right around 1.5k away. So thank you so much, and continue to smash those buttons. Once we do hit that goal, we will be doing another giveaway on the channel aside from the Brandon Nimmo signed jersey giveaway, in which I'm still trying to figure out the proper way to go about doing exactly that from our recent partnership with Mojo DFS. But shout out to Michael, shout out to Charles, shout out to Dominic, Kish, all you beauties. AB, how's it going? Dominic, my man, Brandon, Edwin, Scott, Mike, everyone first chiming in. Mr. Delightful, how you doing? For people that are first chiming in, or maybe you haven't been in here in a while, happy to have you guys in here. Danny, how you doing? Kodomian, all you guys, thank you, thank you, thank you. Really does mean a lot. But guys, we got a lot to get into Mets land. Like I said, we got some key updates, and the big one for me, the big one for me has to be Chris Gross. Now, of course, we did a video on him already, so highly implore you all to check that one out if you haven't already. If you look up Chris Gross, guarantee that'll be the first thing to pop up on YouTube, because not many people knew who the guy was up until we did a video on the channel about it. So please make sure to check it out. But David Stearns, and I know everyone's talked at a decent length about this already, because this has happened a couple days ago, but David Stearns managed to just poach one of the best baseball minds in all the game today when viewing amateur scouting, and Chris Gross, who was their director over there with the Astros. Now he comes over to the Mets, will be VP of amateur scouting, an absolutely massive hire for the New York Metropolitans, as I discussed already. But I cannot emphasize enough how big of a deal this is for a Mets team that is bottom of the barrel all the way, last in baseball over the past decade when acquiring guys via draft and having them produce at the MLB level. The Mets have just over 30 players out of over 300 draft picks over the past decade that have hit the bigs. That is bottom last in baseball. Who's first with 77 or so out of 329 or whatever it may be? It's the Astros, and it's in great part because of guys like this, that being Chris Gross, who has been the head of their amateur scouting, that being the Houston Astros. I don't know, only one of the most successful organizations in all of baseball over the past number of years for the past half decade. So he's had plenty say in key draft picks, Jeremy Pena being a big one of recent years as well. Of course, you even see a guy that, while he's not currently with the club, was still picked by them in later rounds, into Patrick Sandoval. There are so many other guys as well well in that mix that have been because of Chris Gross, including the recent draft picks that the Mets have acquired in that Justin Verlander trade and Ryan Clifford and Drew Gilbert. What, you think Chris Gross didn't have a say and impact in that? Of course he did. You can add him to the list along with many other people, of course, who had their impact, but Chris Gross did so many phenomenal things for the Astros organization, and now he's going to come in the Mets and hopefully help give them sustained success when building through the farm because of the draft, having great success in international scouting, which the Astros have certainly done their fair share of that in recent years. You just want to have a nice balance of someone who doesn't have a great rapport the way that, of course, he does, but someone that can come in and, again, bring you sustainability and comfortability, knowing this is not someone the Mets have to worry about parting ways with in just a couple of years. Chris Gross should hopefully be here for the long haul. It's hard to view this as not anything short of a slam dunk hire, given his track record, everything he's done to this point in his career, has familiarity with David Stearns during David's time, of course, there in Houston a decade ago as the Astros assistant GM, his first true higher-up role in Major League Baseball front offices, and then from there shifted over to the Milwaukee Brewers, became their go-to guy at the helm for a bit up until now, as he's leading the charge for all things Mets as a Mets fan with the New York Metropolitans. That is damn exciting. So Chris Gross is definitely someone where you look at this hire and what it means for the Mets going forward, you just look for that sustainability, as I mentioned plenty. You want to be consistent in your drafts, in which the Mets have had success with their drafts. Drafting hasn't overly been the issue for the Mets over the past half decade, and not full decade, but it has rather been more so developing said players and not partying with them too soon. Cough, cough, Jared Kelenic, cough, cough, PCA. You know, the list goes on and on. You know, the Mets have done a phenomenal job on partying with guys too soon, and this goes, I feel like, as us Mets fans know this far too well, it goes all the way back to Nolan Ryan, right? So this isn't something that just happened overnight. This has been going on for a bit now, and this is certainly something that needs to change for a Mets team that wants to have this sustained success and their ability to be able to start to trade away assets year after year to help them be a consistent contender. Say there is a big piece around at the MLB trade deadline, they want to have a farm that's deep enough where they can pick from that middle pack and not touch too much of the top guys, or even if they do touch the top guys, you know that you have plenty of other options there. Depth, whether it's starting pitching front, whether it's infield, outfield, you want as much depth as possible in these places. So by having someone like Chris Gross here, he will help build this farm really faster than I think fans may seem to realize, given where it's currently at as is. And you just have to be excited about the future here, not only for the Mets to have sustained success, but also be that constant player, hopefully down the road, like a Dodgers, like a Braves, where you're not going to question their willingness to kind of part ways with young talent at the MLB trade deadline, knowing that they're going to have guys that can fill in those roles without a problem, or on the flip hand, partying with guys in free agency, maybe some fan favorites, but knowing they're going to be bringing up guys are so uber talented that the likelihood of them replacing and really succeeding better than those previous veterans on the roster is unbelievably great based on all the numbers you have, and of course the production that those kids have done to that point, whether it's at AA, AAA, or if you're really projecting early, going all the way to say single A, whatever it may be. So Chris Gross, very happy to have him in the organization. That is an understatement. Really is going to come down to as one of the best moves the Mets make this offseason, and I wholeheartedly stand by that. And that is not including the likes of a Yoshinobu Yamamoto signing, whether it might be a Shohei Ohtani, whether it may be a blockbuster trade for a Juan Soto, whether it may be, you know, a big trade, a Tyler Glasnow and a Manuel Margot. Like, the list goes on and on, but with all those potential impact moves, it's saying a lot for Chris Gross to be up there towards the top of the list as the biggest acquisitions that you could have this offseason. So I do want to know everyone initially in the chat right now, when talking about the Mets front office hires, I understand that this is a topic that isn't too digestible or appealing for, say, the average fan that doesn't care about all the little idiosyncrasies that goes on in the organization. But for the ones that certainly do, I do want to know your take on this, because while we did a video on Gross, we haven't really talked at length about Andy Green, which is what we're about to do. So I'm really curious how you guys feel about these moves as a whole. Dave, my man, I will certainly do that. Thank you so much as always for the love, brother. Really does mean a lot. Happy to have you in here. Gotti, how's it going, my man? Finally get time to watch a live show. Keep up the phenomenal work you do. Let's effing go Mets, baby. Happy to have you in here, my man. Thank you so much for the kind words. Sean, how you doing? No Name, how's it going? All you guys first chiming in live on a replay to my 300 plus live years. Happy to have you all in here. And also, yes, I know the Mets have a new bullpen coach. We're going to get into that shortly. Also, would like to make note that tomorrow, as of now, barring any changes, we will have live our second ever episode of Bridging the Gap podcast, talking all things Mets and Yanks every single week, all off season long, specifically when talking about players that both teams are tagged to, front office moves and which one has to do with the other, or just things that, you know, we can banter, friendly banter, and also get pretty ruthless at times to me and my boy Pat, who is covering the Yanks side of things. We're going to be highlighting a lot more on the loose Severino front, hearing from a Yanks fan perspective, especially on top of the latest with Yamamoto and any other key topics that are regarding these two clubs, either respectively or together as a whole. So make sure you're chiming in for that one when we will be there, probably around the same time tomorrow, 8 p.m. or so Eastern, barring any changes. But now let's get into Andy Green. So Andy Green, for those that don't know, also shout out to you, Yoshima. Yes, I know that you like Yoshi on the thumbnail. I do too, right? It's fitting. Maybe I thought of you right away when I actually changed it to green for the font. But Andy Green is coming in now as the Mets senior exec for player development. So what does that mean? He's the head of player development right now, Andy Green. And why is this a big deal? Because Andy Green doesn't have just extensive MLB background as a player, but also has plenty background as a manager, was a two-time manager of the year in minor leagues and AA, if I'm not mistaken, has plenty of success at the MLB level as well, not only as a third base coach, but most recently as a bench boss there in Chicago for the Cubs, in which I heard nothing but great things about over the past year plus, with Andy Green being there with David Ross. And given Ross's departure and the acquisition of Craig Counsell, of course there's going to be a change up in the coaching staff to see what Counsell wants. And while the Cubs did offer Green a job in the front office, or at least in a different area, he decided not to do that after being parted with from his initial role. Mets get the interview done, they bring him in, and he's going to be overseeing player development. And the reason why I love this move so much for the Mets, you know, Chris Gross hire I have here, so it's really not easy to top that because of just how great and how much success he's had over the past decade plus with the Astros. But not too far down, you have Andy Green, because having that MLB experience is vital. And I think having as much of that in the front office can only do you good. And while there are certainly things I disagree with him on, Max Scherzer, when speaking on Foul Territory today, did make a point that I personally, as a fan, can understand and agree with to a degree. When asked about the differences in front office, he said the vibe was so different with Texas, knowing the background that Chris Young has and all these guys do as players. He said it's huge to have people that relate, that have been in their shoes, especially in big games, whether it's World Series or just playoffs as a whole, that can understand the feelings, the emotions, that everything goes into being your everyday player when running your front office. That was something that Max said was greatly impressive that he has enjoyed during his time in Texas with the Rangers. Of course, winning a ring and being a non-factor in doing so while getting paid $40+ million certainly doesn't hurt. But getting into the point here, having guys with the background, with the familiarity, and of course with a renowned amount of, you know, upside from multiple people in respective front offices. I'm hearing a lot of different executives say great things about Andy Green here, as was the case too with Carlos Mendoza. So you see this trend. The Mets are hiring a lot of really smart guys that have baseball experience, that have had great baseball success as well. And now you bring Green in to oversee your player development. And this is vital because this is a Mets team that has struggled mightily with their player development in a lot of aspects throughout the recent years. Now to bring in someone like this should hopefully help give the Mets a little bit of a jump start versus kind of being two steps behind is what it's felt like in this regard when evaluating player development. So you have Andy Green here, you have Chris Gross. Those are your latest front office hires. But now let's get into the latest coaching hire the New York Metropolitans are bound to make. According to Mike Puma, Mets appear close to naming Jose Rosado as their new bullpen coach. Rosado worked with Carlos Mendoza and the Yankees system and was recently a pitching coach in Korea. So before anyone reacts and says, Korea, well, okay, Korea is in Japan, but it's not terribly far. It's closer than us. Is this a play to go and give you an advantage for Yamamoto? No, it's not at all. Let's get that first and cleared out, because we had people on Twitter having the audacity to say stuff like that when that just simply isn't true. Okay, just because the guy has been coaching recently in Korea has nothing to do with a pitcher in a different league and his different descent. He's not Korean, he's Japanese, okay? So if we're going to base it like that, it's not going to take long for some fan to be like, oh, this means the Mets are going to have an advantage with Jung-Ho Lee. One, the Mets aren't scouting Jung-Ho Lee currently, or aren't currently connected, and it wouldn't shock me if they aren't, because he's a great talent, but looks like he's going to be a slap hitter at the MLB level, playing outfield for whoever acquires him, but he's not a pitcher. So we're just doing this connection because one guy was a bullpen coach in Korea? No. We need to stop with that nonsense, okay? So just clearing the air on all the fronts there. But that is the latest hire for the Mets bullpen, their coach rather. So we'll see exactly what he's able to provide. I will say you're definitely getting a solid arm. For those that don't remember, Jose Rosado used to be an MLB pitcher with the Kansas City Royals, pitched in MLB for around 5 seasons, did have at least one All-Star appearance if I'm not mistaken, put up respectable numbers as a starter in the game from the late 90s, and then in his final season with the Royals and the Bigs was in 2000, the year I was born. Yes, I am that young, and yes, you might be just that old. So now let's get into, we talked about those hires. Let's get into the latest moves the Mets have done, right? So Cole Susler, and I actually, I thought I updated his name. I think it's still messed up on the graphic, so bear with me. I thought the graphic changed because, did I spell his name wrong? I think I did. Bear with me 1 second. Oh wow, Wardy had a typo. Sounds like a day that ends in Y. Bear with me as I check through here and continue smashing those buttons, and thank you all so much to everyone for chiming in live replay. It's greatly appreciated. Yep, I did spell it wrong. I thought I updated. I guess not. Okay. Cole Sulzer, 33-year-old right-hander. What do you need to know about this man? He is a minor league signing by the New York Metropolitans, veteran right-hander who has had success in the MLB with a breakout season in the 2021 year with a 2.7 ERA and over 60 appearances. Since then, the guy's been anything but good. Has been very inconsistent since then. However, is of course a reliever, a guy that you're willing to take a flyer on. The Mets have plenty of roster spots as is. Sorry, y'all, I had to sneeze. But is going to be competing for a spot for the Mets bullpen in spring training. Of course, he's on the outside looking in, but this is just one of a plethora of acquirements that the Mets are going to have for pitching, both in the free agent and trade market. To anyone freaking out and saying, wow, of course the Mets did a bottom of the barrel move. Guys, I'm sorry to break this to you, but every single team in baseball makes minor league signings. It's almost like you need guys to pitch in the minor leagues or be borderline MLB caliber talent, especially if they have minor league options that you want to have because of injuries, because of just, say, guys regressing, not performing well. You want to call up guys, give them a chance, because relievers are always such a toss-up. Even guys that have looked uber talented of all the stuff could be a roller coaster. You know, it's like one year you're Jekyll, the other you're Hyde, right? You're doing great, then you're doing terrible. You're doing great, then you're doing terrible. It's a roller coaster. You have 2 seasons with a 2.5 year ERA or lower, then you have another 2 seasons of North 4. Like, relievers are very wacky as is, so I'm not really buying into this too much. This is a borderline MLB talent, veteran right-hander that's looking to establish himself in his game again with the Mets as he'll be competing for a pen spot. I do not expect him to land in the Mets pen whatsoever, and the Mets are going to make a plethora more moves to add to what is a really vacant bullpen right now. I feel like the bullpen at the moment is Edwin Diaz. I mean, we're going to ignore Brooks Raley just for a second, but it just feels like it's Edwin Diaz in this empty room. Cue the Will Smith Fresh Prince of Bel-Air meme when he's walking into his empty house, right? He's looking around, you know, or cue even John Travolta from Pulp Fiction when he's just standing there, you know, turning around. You know, the same applies. So I do think the Mets are going to be making plenty more moves very soon. And I know that there are fans out there that are saying, Wardy, Aaron Nola just re-signed with the Phillies. 7 years, 170 plus million, and there is no trade options in that contract, I believe. Denied higher AAV per year from some clubs, including the Atlanta Braves, because he wanted to stay in Philly, wanted to stay put. Okay. The Atlanta Braves just signed a reliever today to a 3-year, $30 million deal and are planning to stretch him out to utilize him as a starting option to begin the 2024 season, as they, of course, are involved heavily in the starting pitching market, and it feels inevitable that Sonny Gray will find himself landing there, because how is Sonny Gray not the perfect fit for an Atlanta Braves team, right? Like, seriously, for what their willingness usually is with spending and what their willingness is to acquire guys in the free agent market and how they operate, Sonny Gray just has all the rain on the wall to be Brave, and I'm going to stand by that notion. It almost feels like an inevitable thing at this point, even though that there's been connections, there's been nothing too certain yet. That one feels like a lock. So I know you might be asking yourself, Wardy, the Braves, they're off to a hot start. They made a bunch of trades already. They're adding to a bullpen that's already star-studded, and you have the Phillies that are not only bringing back Nola, but are still very much interested in Yoshinobu Yamamoto, while we just signed Cole Sulzer. Should I be concerned? No, you shouldn't, because it's November 20th, 2023. And while at this point last year, there were a lot of big moves that already happened, this market is completely different. And yes, it has everything to do with Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. These respective players are dictating the market so much right now that it's really going to dictate, okay, when you see those other big dominoes, potentially like the Blake Snells, the Jordan Montgomerys, like this is a very underwhelming free agent class. Too, let's keep it a buck. There is some nice bats out there, don't get me wrong, but nothing is too overwhelming this offseason. You look at outfielders, the biggest names are Teoscar Hernandez and Lourdes Gurriel, right? Those are two big names that stand out. DH, Jorge Soler, JD Martinez, Justin Turner, if you're not going to have him in the hot corner. Like those ones stand out. Outfield, center field, Cody Bellinger. That's about it, right? Bullpen, there's plenty of arms out there. That's, of course, a big market. Starting pitching is top heavy. This is a very different market than years past. David Robertson, of course, is a name that I would be very much in favor to bring back to the New York Metropolitans. I'm sure that it will not be the last time that we discuss him here on the channel. But you look at all the feel of the free agent market currently, it's just not the same as last year. It certainly isn't the same as 2 years ago. And because of just the fact that you have Shohei Ohtani in this situation, tells you that this could be something where once the Ohtani domino falls, the floodgates may really open by then. And there have been rumblings that Ohtani may sign with a club prior to winter meetings beginning in the first week of December. So should that happen, buckle up, because we're going to find out real soon on the Ohtani front. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, we're about to get into shortly. There's a lot of key updates on him, and we'll discuss at further length not only what the Mets' chances of getting him, but also latest updates from the Yankees side of things with Pat and our Bridging the Gap podcast tomorrow. Do I think the Yankees have a very good shot at landing Yamamoto? Yes. Do I think it's any better than the Mets landing Yamamoto? No, I really do not. And do I think the Mets may even have a slight edge with Kodai Senga in particular? Yes, I think that very well is a possible way of going about thinking, given Kodai's adamancy and wanting Yoshinobu on the club just as much as I want him too. But I do want to address some comments here before I advance further in the show. But I did just want to make note is the market's different, so no one should be freaking out by the type of moves. And, you know, it's like an old cliche saying sometimes. It's not always about how you start, it's about how you finish, right? And the Mets have so much more to do. They still need to hire a bench coach. They still need to finish out their coaching staff. They need to figure out their rotation, adding minimum 2 to 3 starters this offseason. And I feel very confident in saying that one of the stars the Mets land, even if they still land Yamamoto, may very well come through the trade market. The Mets are actively involved in the trade market as we speak, and this is something that David Stearns has had plenty of success with during his time with the Milwaukee Brewers. We're going to ignore the Josh Hader trade, albeit that year when he was dealt, when Stearns was still running the show there. Hader had a horrendous season to that point. He was even worse when he got traded to San Diego, and the Brewers are not interested in paying the kind of money that Hader would be owed in arbitration that offseason. So for all those reasons, I understand why that happened, and I'm not really looking at it too much more than that, but we've seen plenty of success that Stearns has had in the trade market, even with a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, which is why we highlight Tyler Glasnow today, who's inevitably getting dealt this offseason. It's just a matter of where it's going to be. And the Mets have already shown a level of interest in Manuel Margot that we'll discuss briefly as well. But the point I'm trying to make is this market is not going to be like some recent years past since Steve Cohen became owner. Yes, the Mets are going to do what they can in the free agent market. Yes, they are all in, all over Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Yes, they would love Shohei Ohtani and are still very much involved in that market, aside from the belief that it might be otherwise. The Mets are very active on the Ohtani front. Do not get it twisted. The Mets not landing Ohtani will not be for a lack of effort on their end, I assure you. It would be far more because of Ohtani's lack of interest in coming here specifically, and it might even be the case with the East Coast as a whole, as he is yet to prove up fans, and including myself, otherwise on a new willingness to play on the East Coast, which is something he was unwilling to do reportedly when he first came over a number of years ago when Billy Big Bucks, Epler Masterclass signed him there with the Halos. So let's talk now about Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Okay, so the guy was posted today, starting tomorrow around 8 p.m. Eastern. Why is that important? Because that's right around the same time we're going live here for Bridging the Gap podcast tomorrow night, is when Yamamoto will officially be able to start to negotiate with clubs. And rest assured, David Stearns and the New York Metropolitans are chomping at the bit. They're salivating at the mouth of the idea of having Yamamoto on the Mets, whether that's a 6, 7, 8-year deal. It don't matter. Give the kid an absolute bag. He is exactly what this Mets team needs, as is the case with other clubs. But the difference is the Mets, they have more money to play with usually, And we're Mets fans here. This is a Mets channel. I don't want Yamamoto to go anywhere else, so screw him. We need Yamamoto. I need this guy in this rotation. He's unbelievably talented. We've talked so much of him on the channel already. Him and Kodai Senga would just be such a beautiful sight to headline this rotation. Who would have thought that in like a year's span, we would witness as Mets fans a rotation of Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, and then in that same calendar year, Kodai Senga, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. It's crazy, but I'm all for it. Sign me the heck up. That is how much I want this guy. I'm going to be genuinely pissed off if the Mets don't land him, especially if it's, say, if they had control in it, right? And I don't think that's going to be the case. I will say this, if Yamamoto, say, goes to the Yanks because he grew up a Yanks fan, as in enamored by the idea of playing for them, then while I'll be mad, there's nothing I can really do about that because that's just an unfortunate situation for us in our fandom. But anything that the Mets can control, if they do not land Yamamoto, rest assured your boy's going to call him out on it because he's 25 years of age. He has been far and away absolutely elite at the MPB level and has so much to give, has yet to his peak in his career. Look at what Kodai Senga did as a 29, 30-year-old. Just imagine what you get with Yamamoto 5 years younger. Even if you commit to an 8-year deal, the guy's going to be 32, 33 by time it's over. We just willingly paid $40+ million a year, 2 to 3 years, to guys at the age of 38, 39, 40. So if Yamamoto is as hyped that many of us believe him to be, I have no concerns on a long-term deal whatsoever, at least very little. The only true risk here is, of course, does he not pan out at the MLB level? But that is, of course, where I'd imagine that there will be some certain clauses in the contract saying, you know, we will, of course, have it be this long of a term as long as he pitches this amount of innings. You know, maybe if Tommy John becomes apparent that he can't miss this amount of time, if he does, that the Mets may have an opt-out, because the Mets do have that creative language in their contract, as is with Kodai Senga, in which there can be an opt-out after the third year, if I'm not mistaken. So they will be creative. They have to have a lot of guaranteed money, but rest assured, as these negotiations officially begin tomorrow night, a lot of teams are calling, and the Mets will be one of them. So when could we expect a Yoshinobu Yamamoto signing wherever he may land? Great question you might have, right? Well, the earliest it looks like that we could see a signing would be, I guess, early to mid-December, because he will be continuing to talk to teams into December, into the winter meetings. As of now, he will reportedly not be attending winter meetings, but negotiations will start to take place, and teams are starting to formulate how they want to go about basically presenting their stadiums and their area to him. So this is going to be a little bit of a lengthier process. It's not something where we're going to find out over the next week that he's signing somewhere. It will not be until sometime in December, should the reports from SNY hold true. So we're looking at probably another 2 weeks at least of Yoshinobu Yamamoto talk, and honestly, I don't hate that idea as long as he still ends up with the New York Metropolitans. So we'll be following along to a T every part of that process, but especially as we get to the winter meetings, which is right around 2 weeks from now. Exactly. Yeah, I think we're around 15 days away from winter meetings in Nashville. It's going to be massive. It's going to be big time. And by then, the Mets will have already made some moves. To what degree, we'll soon find out. But rest assured, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the Mets' #1 starting pitching target, is still very much #1 on their target radar. And 2 is someone who they not only want, but in a lot of ways, they need, especially when you look at the remainder of this current starting pitching market, because trades are never guaranteed to happen, because you still have to give to get. Was the willingness or lack thereof from this team? And for agency, once you get off the Jordan Montgomerys and the Blake Snells of the world, you do find yourself falling down a cliff. Sonny Gray is uber talented, but truthfully, Sonny Gray is a guy that I think would bode so well in Atlanta, and I can't say that he would bode well in Queens. You know, there's definitely an element to be had when playing in big market versus that type of market with such a different ran organization in Braves. I feel like the comfortability would be far greater there than it would be here in New York. And albeit while he had a lack of success during a small stint with the Yankees, there was a butting of heads with the pitching staff with utilizing the slider or not, which certainly played a part in his lack of success, but also the media, the pressure as well. At the end of the day, Sonny Gray is not someone that is accustomed to being a big market too much, and there's no guarantee on how he would be able to produce. The only upside is that he's that kind of mid-level that you can get on a very reasonable deal. You're not going to be drastically overpaying for him, given that he's already 34 and he can give you a lot of productivity. So aside from those, you really start to fall off a bit when you come to your certainties. There's a lot of uncertainties in that free agent pitching market. There's a couple names I certainly am appealed by, including another Yoshinobu Yamamoto type pitcher, meaning he's from the MPB, but this time a southpaw at the age of 30 and veteran Shota Imanaga, who we've done a video on the channel already. The Mets have shown a level of interest there. They've scouted him over the past calendar year, pitching there in Japan, and is definitely one of multiple pitchers on this team's current radar. But as we steer away from Yoshinobu Yamamoto and the potential or lack thereof of the Mets landing him, let's get into other arms that the Mets currently have interest in, ones that are not going to headline the rotation, but are more so innings eaters, guys that whether you're going to be willing to take a flyer on or just shorter term deals, you know, lower AAV, but guys that can come in, be productive, eat innings for you for a Mets team that needs as much help in this rotation as humanly possible. But I do see a donation, so let me address that here in 1 second. Let's see. TJ, thank you so much for a $10 holla. TJ says, what are your ideal bullpen additions? Does the plan change at all if we get Yamamoto and have a 6-man rotation? So the plan doesn't really change much because I've been thinking, hopefully in the thought process, that the Mets are going to land Yamamoto. I'm fully expecting the Mets to have a 6-man rotation next year until proven otherwise. So thinking with that mindset, there are definitely plenty of arms out there that I would love for the Mets to add to this pen. However, I can't speak on too much specific names at the moment because I've been teetering a lot with options in the free agent market versus options in the trade market, and there are a plethora of names out there, guys that you never even heard of that are out there that have been productive for a number of years on clubs that could come at a pretty understandable and reasonable price that the Mets could do. Like, I very well can see the Mets doing another offseason like last year where you acquire Brooks Raley type relievers, guys that can be solid, you know, and middle to high leverage when needed, can eat innings for you, of course, in that utilized role, especially if you're focusing lefty on lefty or righty on righty, whatever it may be. David Robertson, of course, would have loved that reunion. I think that even though that he had his struggles there in Miami, he probably didn't want to be there, you know, aside from the fact that, yeah, I'm in a playoff race now. You know, the appeal wasn't the same. You could tell that Robertson loved it when he came to Queens fast. I'm sure that went in hand with his familiarity with New York, being that longtime New York Yankee, having the type of championship success that he has had in this big market. He knows what it takes to win here. Him in that setup role is what we want to see that we never got to see. So let's run it back, baby. David Robertson is definitely a guy I would love to see in the pen. Give him a 1-year deal. He still has juice left in the tank. And him as the setup man for Edwin Diaz, I don't think too many fans would be complaining about, at least at this current time of discussing him. Then there are plenty of other names out there. Josh Hader is the pipe dream. I do not foresee that happening. He feels like he will be a Texas Ranger until proven otherwise, especially with their lack of state tax there too. Those things certainly come into play when making decisions, as will be the case to an extent, I'm sure, with Hader and his future. So yeah, I don't want to deep dive too much on the pen currently at the moment, just because there's a lot of different names out there that I like, and Robertson is definitely one that I wouldn't hate the idea of him returning and having that reunion. But beyond that, I think we're going to kind of find ourselves in our top 5 videos that we usually do, because I'm actively working on one for trade targets, which I feel like most of you Mets fans should understand the bill with what those players are going to be, but some of you also may be surprised at the same time, and then get into also bullpen targets, specific guys that stand out to me. And yes, for the first time since starting the channel, I am not going to be crying for Andrew Chafin. Always will love Andrew Chafin, but I am not prioritizing him as a fan and as someone who feels he would fit the bill for the Mets so well like I have in years past. Because truthfully, I don't think that he would fit the bill as good as he would have in years past, given where he's currently at in his career. But of course, I could be proven wrong, so maybe that means that the Mets will finally land themselves a guy like Andrew Chafin. But let's get into some of your comments now, guys, before I answer more on what is next for this Mets team when looking at their starting pitching targets, because Luis Severino is definitely a guy we're going to expand on here in a minute. We're going to get into a little bit on Brandon Woodruff. Was going to have a video out on him. However, we did find out the front office news, and that was far bigger priority than just doing a hypothetical video on Woodruff. So want to get that out of the way first. Woodruff will discuss more at length in this video. May do a separate video on him in the future should the Mets be connected as well, because there are a lot more cons to Brandon Woodruff than what I initially believed, which is exactly why we do our homework and we do our due diligence. When you have a pitcher that has had capsule injuries to the point of having numbness in his fingers and trying to grip his pitches, That's a big problem. You know, that is a far greater problem. Shoulder injuries are not an easy thing to come back from. And while the Brewers did try to bring back Brandon on a 2-year deal, they could not reach a deal negotiation, which led him and them to having that departure. They're still open and willing to return. So I don't even think it's the potential end of Brandon Woodruff's time in Milwaukee for certain yet. But I will say, wherever he lands, this is going to be a deal, of course, that could be worth the risk, but at the same time, you can understand the risk factor quite a bit. There's a lot more cons than I initially realized on the Brandon Woodruff front. But as always, with that talent, that arm, and that potential, should he get back to form or close to, you would be foolish not to, at minimum, consider the idea of bringing him in, and whether it's a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year option, a 1-year deal with a 2-year option, whatever it may be. What percentage does the Mets land Yamamoto? I think the Mets currently, as we stand, have at minimum a 50% chance of landing Yoshinobu Yamamoto, even with how big of a market he has. And if there's one thing that is good about Yamamoto having such a big market, this is going to speed up fast starting tomorrow night, okay? Yes, he's going to be taking his time. He's going to be meeting with clubs. He's going to be checking out respective organizations. He's going to be going to Citi Field, checking all that fun stuff out. However, aside from doing all that, it's going to speed up. A lot of teams are interested in him. So we're going to kind of find out maybe rather quickly which teams are interested, but their domino that's kicked out, that domino's fallen. Yeah, they have interest, but they're not going to shell the money. Yeah, the St. Louis Cardinals just signed Lance Lynn today to a 1-year, $10 million deal. And yes, they still have interest in Yamamoto, but are they going to shell out the money the Mets are? No, they're not. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that one out either. The Atlanta Braves, are they going to be willing to shell out the money for Yoshinobu Yamamoto? Maybe. I'm never going to count the Braves completely out with things, so I'll say maybe for the sake of having respect for AA and the great moves he's had as a GM, even though I don't like the guy because I hate the Braves. The Phillies, you can't count them out, and they have shown a willingness to spend the money. But this is going to come down to dollars being a huge factor at the end of the day. On top of being somewhere where you can have success right away and potential of really building sustained success. That in itself is exactly why the Mets are one of the top dogs in this. Okay? So if you have, say, an Atlanta Braves team that would love to bring in Yamamoto on, let's go, 6 years, $180 million. Then you have the Mets offer 8 years, well over 200. You know, is just having a better team on paper your priority right away, Yamamoto? Is it money? Is it location? Big market versus Atlanta, which, let's be real, as talented as Atlanta is, and that is as a sports town, they're not nearly big market to the degree that New York is. How much of that does that play a factor? So there's a lot of things that you have to weigh when evaluating and viewing the Yamamoto market. But let's not forget, folks, this is a Steve Cohen-ran Mets at the end of the day that we have seen firsthand. When he wants something, he will do everything that he possibly can. David Stearns, a very similar story now, wanting something, not only anything, but someone who just fits the bill. I don't think I would be speaking nearly as highly on Yamamoto if he wasn't at the age he's at and just at the career projection that he's at. That age of 25 is so unbelievably important that if this was a Kodai situation 2.0, I very well could understand far more if, say, the Mets didn't have the same level of interest because they're really figuring themselves out, not only for 2024, but certainly 2025 and beyond. So I can understand if the level of interest wasn't to the same degree if Yamamoto's 5 years older than what he is now. But given the age and given the ridiculous amount of success that this kid has had so far, it's insane not to see the Mets being all in on this team, which is why they've been reportedly all in. And by team, I mean Yamamoto, of course. Just a really exciting time in Mets land. And I cannot wait to see how this all progresses on the front of Yamamoto and those sweepstakes. But let's get into now. Yes, Luis Severino, everyone's favorite New York pitcher, right? Said absolutely nobody. Maybe Yanks fans though in 2017, 2018, but not a whole lot since then, as Luis Severino has been anything but consistent when looking at his health for the past 4 years. And it's just hilarious because so many content creators, friends I know, since 2018 on, just saying, Sevy's going to lead the way. Oh my goodness, Garrett Cole and Sevy in the same rotation, all this stuff. And every single year I'd find myself laughing because I'm like, when are you going to learn? It's like us Mets fans with our blindness when it's right in front of us, when the writing's on the wall, when we know Jacob deGrom isn't coming back, but we're getting our hopes up, right, because of his injuries. Same applied with Sevy with the Yanks so many times. You think he's going to be there, and then bam, he's out 6 months. Okay, he started to produce well, bam, shut down a couple weeks. Sevy's going out of his way to talk on social media how frustrated he is with the Yanks organization, saying he's healthy, he wants to play, he wants to do this and wants to do that. Can't. Tries to force himself to go play and do this and do that. Can't, because he's not performing well. A 2023 6.65 ERA or so performance from Luis Severino. He was dog shit, pardon my French. He had a horrendous season. But why are teams interested, including the New York Mets, in taking a flyer on Luis Severino? It's because if you look outside of this past year, he's had nothing but success. He came in the bigs around 21 years of age, had a dominant 2017-2018 season, has not been that pitcher since then, because the most important thing is availability at the end of the day. And Luis Severino has not been able to play his part to a degree. As a reliever, I think there's so much potential with Severino. He's a guy that has had a reliever experience to a degree in 2021 with the Yanks and had success in doing so. But when you evaluate all the starting pitching out there, and there's that lack of depth, the Mets are also not pivoting, but focusing outside of Yamamoto in the free agent market on guys that can just help bring them innings and also just have a plethora of options. So landing a Severino does not mean the Mets will not prioritize a Yamamoto. Landing Severino does not mean that the Mets are out on the idea of trading, say, for a Tyler Glasnow or a Dylan Cease. Again, not guaranteeing saying that those things are going to happen, but the point I'm trying to make is that those things very much can still be in the cards of happening, because Severino falls in the same tier as the following players, according to SNY here today, and Michael Wacha, Kyle Gibson, Sean Manaea types. Now, of course, these guys had varying success in 2023. Manaea had a bit of a bounce back year, if I'm not mistaken. Kyle Gibson is, a guy that's, always going to be that bottom of the rotation type starter. Just had that one anomaly season a couple years ago with the Texas Rangers that led him to being dealt to the to the Philadelphia Phillies. And Michael Wacha, who has really found himself since leaving the Mets after that 2019 season, and has rejuvenized his rotation and put up a really, really strong year with the Padres. So back-to-back years now, really, really strong performance there from Wacha. Just a matter of how deep he can go into games. And of course, his stuff, while it's nice, it's nothing too overwhelming. It's just a matter of, can he stay honing his craft, especially with that breaking ball. So you look at the options currently, and personally, if say we're picking one out of these current group, I'm taking Michael Wacha every day of the week if we're talking about just having immediate success for your number 5 rotation spot, right? I would probably go in the order of Wacha, Severino, Gibson, Manaea. I would probably go in that order. Manaea has been very underwhelming to me in recent years, has not been the same guy since his time in Oakland. His arm health concerns me, as is the case with Severino too. But Sevy's only 29 years of age, which also makes someone like him very appealing. It's the fact that he is destined to be a bounce back candidate, has solid stuff, has life, has velo, but the command was just so shit this season. Unbelievable. The walk rate was a bit up versus what Sevy's usually pretty good at commanding the zone when he's on. Had 3.4 walks per 9 this year, but just the lack of dominance in his location and his pitches overall. Normally a 10 plus K per 9 pitcher, wasn't even an 8 K per 9 this past season, and just under 20 starts with the Yanks while enduring ailments throughout the season. So Sevy, completely understand the pros and cons to. I completely get it if you guys are not in favor of Severino. And I completely get it if you are, especially on a 1-year deal, maybe with a second-year option. Something along those lines is certainly a thing that I would be in favor of as a fan. And Wacha gives you too many 2020 flashbacks. Yes, literally. Yeah, I know. Wacha. I will say, though, that even though that Wacha, I don't love the idea, as your number 5, I certainly do not hate, okay? The Mets are not going to have the best rotation in baseball next year. I'm sorry to break it, everyone. They're not in a current position where they're able to do that. So that's why the Yamamoto thing is such a heavy priority, because beyond that, there are question marks with how the Mets plan to fill out this rotation, and they need to add at least 2 other starters after Yamamoto, most likely. But that's why, even though the free agent market is underwhelming, no one should be shocked if the Mets find themselves in the trade market here, because they actively are. And they have been in active negotiations with the Tampa Bay Rays over the past week plus for Manuel Margot. And now that Margot is someone that's still available and is owed $10 million for this next season, if you're going to bring in Manuel Margot as a guy to kind of be your fourth outfielder type, why not bring Tyler Glasnow along with him? Doesn't that make a whole lot more sense than just Margot and himself, which is not going to be anything groundbreaking for your club whatsoever. Not that the Mets need another guy that lacks power in the corner outfield, is just a solid defender and doesn't get on base at a great clip and struggles with his slugging. You know, like there's quite a bit to be desired on Manuel Margot, aside from him having plenty of success against southpaw pitching over the past couple of years in baseball as a whole. So pairing Tyler Glasnow, who has done really well. Glasnow, yes, he has his injury history. Yes, there's always going to be concern. And yes, it is something that us fans need to be making note of when evaluating him. And guys, we're getting so close to 200 likes, so continue to smash that like and subscribe on if you're watching the live show. And thank you so much in advance, everybody. It is greatly appreciated. As we look up Tyler Glasnow's numbers right now, and he's someone I'm going to be talking at further length in the future video, so stay tuned for that one. But I want to bring him up here mainly because of the Tampa Bay Rays connection, with the Mets having interest in Margot, if Glasnow could be a part of this too, but also David Stearns having success in the past trading with these same Tampa Bay Rays, headlined by the Willy Adames deal he did a couple years ago during his time in Milwaukee. But as we get into Glasnow now, what am I saying here? In 2023, had a 3.5 ERA in 120 innings, of course, coming back from his Tommy John surgery. And we're looking at a 1.08 whip. What are we looking at for the K per 9 here for Mr. Glasnow? Let's check right now. Okay, so in 2023, we're at a 12.15 K per 9 and a nice 2.78 walks per 9. That is what you love to see. A 10 difference between the K and the walk per 9. Very much in favor of that. Sign me the hell up. Now, Glasnow, when you look at throughout his career, his lack of availability, it's important to make note of. In 120 innings this past season, was the most innings he has pitched in his major league career. So I think a question many fans, including myself, have when evaluating Tyler Glasnow is a couple things. It is one, how reliable, how healthy can this guy be? Is he someone that the Mets can finally get to a level in which he will have sustained success and be able to stay on the mound more than anything? Or is this a Glasnow that's going to continue to fluctuate with his health while he's still only at the age of 29, 30? There's still a lot of risk being involved should you go out of your way to trade for him, knowing that you're dealing with the Tampa Bay Rays out of all clubs. It's not an easy thing to trade with the Rays, even if you've had success like David Stearns certainly has had in years past. Fair arguments, completely understand. But you also look at Glasnow, and if the Mets were going to be going out of their way to acquire him, is this a Tampa Bay Rays situation where Glasnow, while he's fluctuated the innings, has been very successful, is a product more so of the Tampa Bay Rays and the pitching lab they have there with their phenomenal analytics department, whereas as soon as he leaves Tampa, could kind of plummet a little bit with production? Or is this a situation where he does not only have that talent, but can utilize that in any system he's in? I would hope and believe the latter there, which would lead me to believe that the Mets should go in on Tyler Glasnow here and try to get a deal done. Now, regardless on what happens with Yoshinobu Yamamoto, I will even go a step further in saying that while Glasnow has this injury history, he also fits the bill as someone that, as long as you're not giving up an arm and a leg for too much, at least for someone like him, you might have yourself a nice piece in this rotation for the next 5 years at minimum. And that can be really important for this Mets team, again, that is looking to compete as soon as next season. Think about a rotation. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Kodai Senga, Tyler Glasnow, and Jose Quintana as your 1, 2, 3, 4. That's pretty damn good. On paper, that's actually one of the better ones in baseball, which is nuts when looking at how the rotation was supposed to be heading into this past season. So Glasnow, understand the pros and the cons to completely. And then we have a guy like Dylan Cease, for example, who had a very underwhelming 2023 campaign right around from trade deadline on. The White Sox, per usual, made a silly choice by not trading him away when he was at peak value and went on to have a really brutal end of the season. Cease, while the velo has been dropping, while the horizontal break in the slider has not been the same, and the Dodgers have heavy interest in Dylan Cease, it would be silly for the Mets not to at minimum do their due diligence here. Dylan Cease is one of my personal favorite pitchers in baseball that is not a New York Metropolitan. I love the life on the velo with the fastball. I love the slider when it's on. Dylan Cease, while he hung plenty pitches towards the second half of last year and had a lack of success, struggled with the strike zone quite a bit, is someone who went on, is unbelievably explosive, and could do damage against clubs in the division like the Atlanta Braves, like the Miami Marlins, and certainly like the Philadelphia Phillies. And why not? We'll throw in the Nationals in there too, even though that they might find themselves being the best contact hitting team against the Mets, because the Nats, give them credit, have been very good at putting the ball in play in recent years since they essentially started their retool after trading away Juan Soto. So I'm very appealed, very interested in those trade options personally, and I definitely love the idea of the Mets landing either of them for this rotation. And as we look at, not Glass now, but as we look at the numbers of Dylan Cease here briefly, let's do exactly that. Let's go Chicago White Sox, South Side. That is a shit show right now, both player-wise and just everything about it at the moment. I shouldn't say player-wise because they have a lot of talent there. Oh, there's so much talent, but there's a shit show from ownership down, unfortunately, which is beyond frustrating. And I feel for White Sox fans that just are not allowed to have nice things because of their dog shit owner. But 177 innings, a 4.5 ERA for Dylan Cease in his age 27 season. Oh my goodness. No wonder he's going to cost an arm and a leg still. Not to the same degree as the trade deadline, but Cease is still going to cost quite a bit because he's young, has multiple years of control still on that contract. Again, 184 innings last year. Dylan had a 2.2 ERA. Disgusting. 2021 year, he had himself a 3.9 ERA. 4.01 his sophomore season, and his rookie year 5.79, has a career 3.83 ERA. Strikeouts have just been through the roof when he is on. He was right around 11 K per nine this year, but 4 walks per nine. The walk rate, I can certainly see Jeremy Hefner doing his best bit and helping him on, similar to Kodai Senga. Last year though, 11 K per nine to 4 walks per nine. So we have seen a slight drop off from the K per nine in 2021. Dylan Cease, most dominant year in the strikeouts per nine, 12.28 to a 3.69 walks per nine. Then 11.10 for K per nine in 2022, and at 10.88. So it's slightly going down each year, and I could see even dropping down a little bit more next year, but still young, a lot of potential, so much life in this arm, and definitely a guy that if the Dodgers land, can be an X factor for them wholeheartedly. If the Dodgers get this guy, it's not going to be fun because this is the exact type of arm that isn't a reclamation project. This is not like a Noah Syndergaard situation where Noah dealt with his serious injuries and is a shell of what he once was, and it will probably never be nearly what he ever was again. Should even stay in the bigs. Cease, on the other hand, has a lot of potential still. Disgusting. When he's on, can be in there, can give you north of 200 innings a season as long as he's healthy. I love a lot of things about Dylan Cease, and definitely a guy I too would be in favor of. And as we talked briefly already, Brandon Woodruff, who of course was parted with by the Brewers, when he's healthy, he's a Cy Young caliber pitcher. I even like his pitches quite a bit more at times than Corbin Burns. That's how talented the guy is. But similar to Tyler Glass now, that lack of availability consistently in his career. But the worst part about Brandon Woodruff, he has a gruesome past history with injuries. And now dealing with the shoulder, the capsule injury now, I would argue is a far bigger concern than Tommy John. Because Tommy John, once they get back, give them a year or so, they're usually good to go. Yeah, the velo might take a little bit to get back, or the velo might not be the same, but the location is usually always there. Tommy John is such a normal thing in baseball today that, aside from it sucking that you're losing the guy for a year plus, and that may hurt their development in their career, especially if they're younger and have yet to hit the bigs, aside from that, there's nothing overly concerning when evaluating Tommy John. Shoulder issues, though. How many starting pitchers that we know in the game today have come back completely without a problem after dealing with serious shoulder injuries? Shoulder injuries. Did I say soldier? Shoulder injuries. My mistake. It's not nearly as common, right? And guys, continue smashing that like and subscribe on as we're trying to get so close to 200 likes by the end of the live show. People on replay, same applies. Continue smashing those buttons. Again, thank you all so much in advance as you're chiming in all the latest here on WardyNYM, talking all things Mets. Puma Harrison, if it's regarding the Mets bullpen coach, we already discussed it earlier in the show. Oh, okay. There we go. Phil Nevin, a strong contender for the Padres managerial opening, is among those under consideration for Mets bench coach. Nevin and Carlos Mendoza work together with the Yankees. Of course, I would love the idea of Willie Randolph. And Willie's a guy that if he's really being considered, sign me up right away. But I would not be opposed to Phil Nevin whatsoever. Because what does Phil Nevin have that the Mets do not currently have in their coaching staff. It's a guy that was managing games every single day last year, which was Phil Nevin. Literally just finished his tenure there with the Halos and has been under heavy consideration for the Padres. I've heard rumblings that he was a lock to be the Padres manager. That may not be true. Maybe they're going to stay in-house with Mike Shildt. Of course, he was part of it a couple years ago from the Cardinals, and that's just working out smoothly in there in St. Louis, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sure Cards fans love hearing that. But in all seriousness, I would like Phil Nevin. I wouldn't be opposed to that hire whatsoever. I want the Mets to bring in someone with experience for their bench coach role. And knowing that he has previously worked with Mendoza to get together during their time with the Yanks, sign me the hell up. I really don't think I need to overlook that one too much. Now, Willie, I don't even know truly the availability of Willie. You know, he spoke saying that, you know, if Mendoza needs him, he's there. I don't know if that's going to lead to Willie Randolph being back with the organization, being back with the Mets after managing them, just a little under 2 decades ago. But what I do know is that from the start, initial rumblings and belief was that the Mets would be interviewing guys that have managerial experience, like Phil Nevin, like Gabe Kapler, to name a few. Nevin have no issue whatsoever, and the Mets end up not only going down that route, but bring him in as their bench boss. I want someone who has experience, and I think the more recent experience, the better. Even if he wasn't fantastic as a manager, that's fine, because we don't need him as manager. We just want someone to help make Mendoza feel as comfortable as possible in this role, have a strong baseball mind, and feed off of someone that understands kind of the do's and don'ts, knows kind of what worked for him, at least the success he had, lack thereof with the Halos, and kind of, you know, how to go about those things. So very much down with Phil Nevin should have happened. Ricardo, thank you for the $5 holla. Ricardo says, Wardy, I think I'm going to pass on Yamamoto. He's going to cost too much. Wholeheartedly disagree, my friend, but I appreciate your input here. My 3, Ryu, cease in a trade. Make Mike Clevenger or Severino, Urias Rodriguez. Yeah, I'm not interested in Hyun-Jin Ryu too much personally. I don't know how much he got there with someone like him at this point in his career. Cease would love in a trade. Agree there. Clevenger had a very sneaky season this past season with the Chicago White Sox. Clev, definitely a solid arm that could be utilized in the towards the end of the rotation as, say, your number 4 even. I don't think Clevenger is a bad idea at all. There are some questions about Clevenger and, you know, off the field that we've heard about over the past couple of years, but discussing the player, at least into what we know, Clev certainly had himself a nice year there and what was a rather very horrendous year otherwise in South Side. And then you get into Severino again as a number 5 and that competing that spot. I don't hate the idea. Just wouldn't want anything more than that, and certainly wouldn't want anything more than a flyer type contract deal, a 1 to 2 year deal at most. And then Urias is not going to be pitching in baseball again, more than likely. If you're talking about Julio Urias, do not see that happening. I think his times in Major League Baseball are done, and it actually would make plenty of sense if he ends up pitching Mexican League, considering that he too is Mexican and he's like literally right there. So I could see that happening. Rodriguez, I'm assuming you're referring to Yariel Rodriguez, who is more so of a reliever than a starter at this point, who's coming over, was pitching the MPB, stayed, however, after playing for Team Cuba, they stretched him as a starter in the World Baseball Classic this year. He then stayed in the DR for the entire year to continue to train and practice and get ready to be posted and available for the free agent market. So I do not foresee the Mets going out of their way for Yariel Rodriguez. However, wouldn't be opposed to him whatsoever for the pen. Has a nasty life on those pitches, and it really impressed me at the World Baseball Classic. Just an arm that I would love to see the Mets get, but of course he's not someone that they would be getting and viewing him as a sure lock as a starter. He's very much more of a Trevor Williams-esque type guy when how he can be utilized. But hey, maybe his peak could be a number 5 starter in baseball if he is stretched out. All I know is he's got nasty stuff and he's done great in limited sample sizes in years past in the MPB. Joe DeMeo tweeted something. Let's see what Joe tweeted. Okay, Glenn Sherlock returning is a very important move for the continued growth of Francisco Alvarez behind the plate. Glenn Sherlock is returning for the Mets in that catcher role, which is not a problem whatsoever. Which also reminds me, the Mets are returning Danny Barnes as well, that Mike Puma reported on earlier, if I'm not mistaken. Danny Barnes will return to Mets bench as the team's information coach. His contract did expire last month. And before people freak out, Danny Barnes is not Jeremy Barnes. Jeremy Barnes is a Mets co-heading coach with Eric Chavez now, that tandem that they had in the 2022 season, which the Mets had success. Then this past year, with just Jeremy Barnes as hitting coach, the Mets did not have success. That Barnes is separate from Danny Barnes, so do not view them as the same, because some people on social media are seeming to do exactly that. So that's all the latest on the Mets coaching front and all their hires and things like that. And I am going to be getting out here in just a minute or so, guys. But before I do, I just wanted to, again, thank you all so much, everyone that chimed into the live show. Highly implore you all, again, to continue smashing that like and subscribe button if you enjoy the consistent Mets coverage. We will be live tomorrow night, barring any changes. Of course, if there's breaking news that happens earlier, we will discuss it then. Regarding all the latest in Mets and Yanks land, awesome banter, butting of heads. Pretty much, if you're looking for competent New York sports radio where people know what they're talking about, can have respectful conversations, can also bash each other without a problem with no feelings hurt, and just have a fun back and forth. And again, actually know what they're talking about, actually knowing what players are on their rosters. I know it seems very hard for certain radio shows nowadays, and they know who they are, just speaking a whole lot of nonsense. This is the opposite. It's a different way to go about your New York baseball content and how it is consumed. So again, check out Bridging the Gap podcast. We'll be live tomorrow night right around 8 p.m. Eastern, barring any changes. We may have a video out before then too if there's any news, so just be on the lookout. And of course, consistent coverage all week long, off season long, leading into Thanksgiving this Thursday. So Mets fans, thank you all so much for watching. It is greatly appreciated. I'm going to answer a couple comments, questions, and concerns before I get out of here, and then we'll wrap things up. So if you have any key questions you would like me to answer, now is the time to ask away. Wouldn't Nevin be a help for Ohtani? I can't imagine it hurting. I'll say that much. Unless he's like, screw Nevin. You know, like I did not like him during his time with the Halos. Unless that's the case, I don't know. Let's see. Call themselves the bad boys of baseball. Teams should side Urias, Bauer, Wander Franco, Pham. Don't put Pham in that mix. Just because Pham bitch slapped Jock doesn't mean he's a bad boy. Pham isn't getting into stupid shit, you know, or really messed up things like we saw with Franco. Bauer, it's a different situation because that has actually more to do with just personality than what he did, because we found out that he didn't do nearly as much as what he was accused of. And Urias, that's a different situation because he did do what he's been accused of. Clevenger, another one. Odd situation. Point is, I don't see any of those guys being New York Mets next season. And at most, I would hope it's Tommy Pham. Wasn't Danny Barnes the bad guy in Karate Kid 3? Maybe Mike, maybe. See, that was such a unique comment that I'd have to imagine you do know the answer to that, and you're just asking anyway. What if in this scenario we legit did get Ohtani? What would the rotation look like? Well, can Shohei return from his injury at the level similar to what he was doing? Because this will be Shohei's second TJ already. And to have him come back and be what you're hoping he's going to be is still a question mark. But if you land Shohei Ohtani, let's say dream off season, not even close to anything otherwise. Dream off season, you land Ohtani and you also land Yamamoto. Then your rotation for 2025 would potentially be Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and Kodai Senga as your 1, 2, 3. That isn't only just sick and unprecedented as a three-headed monster, all from Japan, for one, and would change the landscape entirely. The entire country of Japan would become Mets fans at that point, which would give the Mets not only ridiculous media coverage beyond what they already get, but for Cohen, wouldn't hurt you. You're going to make a shit ton more money with national coverage like that. And things will drastically change. But having a rotation like that very well could dictate winning a World Series. And I don't think there would be many Mets fans complaining if that were to happen. So that, I think, is where I'm going to leave you guys with. But man, oh man, I'm just really, really excited to see what is next for this Mets offseason. Finally gets something start to go. Seriously. But I know you guys are probably chomping at the bit right now. It's 9:10. Monday Night Football has started. You can't wait to watch the Kelsey Bowl. I know Taylor isn't there, so I know to all you basic bitches out there that are looking forward to that, I'm sorry that isn't happening. Also, apologies for the profanity. That just, the entire Swiftie thing is just, it's beyond me. You know, it's just, I digress. I'll leave it at that. hoping it's a great game for anyone that's watching. But this is your boy Wardy signing out. I got my Knicks to watch. I got my Rangers to watch. I'm going to go do that. If you're Islanders fan, Devils fan, Nets fan, whoever you're a fan of, have fun watching your teams if they're playing tonight. Let's go Mets, baby. We'll be back live tomorrow. Consistent coverage all week long. Your number one source